so others can experience those same thoughts. Books are experiences. Written pieces are experiences transcribed for other people to have. And that's insane. That's amazing. And that's what Bring Your Words really is about that sort of idea of putting our experiences down on the page. That's why it's kind of unique that there's 10 authors in this anthology, is that these are 10 different, entirely different life experiences that have been put together. So I want to thank you all for coming out here today. I want to thank Fifth Avenue Press for letting us ramble on up here. And thank you so much.
That was actually a perfect segue into our next book, because this is another person who has this other job where they teach and inspire high school students with English and creative writing at Pioneer High School, and a long history with Neutral Zone and poetry slams around town is Jeff Cass. This is his second book with Fifth Avenue Press. We're selling both of them in the back. And this one I know is close to his heart because it's got sports at its core, and it's our third or our fourth YA novel. So please give a warm welcome to Jeff Cass.
Thank you, Erin. I'm really proud to be part of this press again. That first book, that was amazing, and I'm really excited to be on part of a press that puts a book like that out in the community, so I'm very excited. I also think that my students who are here today, submit your work, right? Put your work together in a manuscript and get it to the press. Who knows? Maybe it'll get published. So this book, Center Mid, is kind of a book that was written out of frustration to some degree. I was going to read one small chapter so I can kind of tell the story a little bit. My daughter and son, as they were growing up, I would read to them at night all the time, and we often read like these sports novels by Mike Lupica or Tim Green or Carl Duker, these really great young novels. They're always about like boy athletes and what boy athletes are doing, which is great. I'm all for boy athletes, but at the same time, like at Pioneer, some of the most incredible athletes are not boys, right? Like the field hockey team wins state championship after state championship, or in the state final. The swim team's amazing, the girls tennis team, and there's never any stories about them. Even at Pioneer now, like the field hockey team, like I said, is a nationally recognized program, and we never hear anything about them on the morning announcements, but we hear about the football team, which is in a good year, maybe they're middle of the pack, but like the field hockey team is amazing. And I always feel like these girl athletes I've had that work so hard never got the credit they deserve or the recognition they deserve. And then when I started looking for books to read to my daughter, like, well, let's find, books that have girl athletes. And we searched and searched, and we would find some, and they weren't terrible. There's some good authors out there, but they always seem to have the premise that you could like be a girl athlete and then also be cute enough that the football quarterback will date you and take you to the prom. And that always kind of like bugged me, because I felt like, well, that's not what like my daughter's like as an athlete. That's not what her teammates are like. Like they just want to play their sport and love it the same way that the boys do. And there was never like a boys narrative of like, you could play sports but also be sensitive and nice enough to like get a date. There's nothing like that. So I'm like, okay, maybe it's time to try to write something. I've also been obviously very heavily influenced by my wife, Karen Smite, who's a world-class athlete for the Canadian rowing team. And over the years, she's a lot better athlete than I am, a lot more mentally tough, when it comes to any kind of athletic endeavor. And like, all right, well, let's just try to write something where, yeah, there's boys involved, yeah, there's drama because it's high school, but like when it comes down to it, what really matters to these girls is how badass they are in the field hockey field. So that's what Center Mid is kind of really hoping to talk about. And it's the first in what I hope will be a 3-book series, and I'm actually hoping that Karen will help me write the next 2 and help me correct whatever modifications are necessary. So I'm just going to read a short chapter. This is the second chapter. The main character's name is Allison. She narrates kind of first-person Catcher in the Rye style, and her best friend is Mallory, and they're the 2 captains of the team, or 2 of the 3 captains, or 2 captains of the team, yeah. In warm-ups, Mallory runs away from me, like always. She's not trying to beat me, she's trying to beat herself. Has always tried to do that. Ever since 5th grade, when we got serious about this game, and she decided when the coach said we had to run a lap around the field, she'd run every inch of the field. No shortcuts. Around the entire rectangle of turf, she stays on the outside of the sideline, and I battle to keep up. We try to set the tone so no one on our team will cut corners, but inevitably someone does. And that someone will briefly pull closer to Mallory and me. But then Mal will find another gear and speed up and make that girl small in the rear view. And I will speed up and try to catch Mallory. And usually I won't be able to, but my best friend can't cheat even if she wanted to. And she makes me believe that about myself too. After stretching, we drill 2-on-1s. Mal and I against one defender. That's not a fair fight. In my dreams, almost every night, I see Mallory run, cutting toward the middle on a sharp line that looks like a sleek sailing boat homing in on the regatta's finish. I move my wrists when I'm sleeping, flick a pass, and without slowing down, she swings, and then it happens. My first favorite sound in the world, the ball resounding off the wooden board at the back of the goal like a great gong, a song that says, "We did it, we conquered, game over, we won." I'm not lying when I say I move my wrists when I'm asleep. I dream the dream of passing to Mallory as many nights as I can. It's the dream that keeps me from dreaming about being the sad girl with no college scholarship, the lonely, loser all the time girl, the tough girl nobody likes, or worse, the dream of my mother passed out in a ditch. In real wide awake life, we kill it. The defender rushes toward me, and when her hips move past the point where she can't go back, that's the instant I flick the pass. Mal's open, and her booming shot never misses. If the defender chooses to block the passing lane, I fake, and then I'm gone. My own booming shot smacks the wood. Nobody stops us. Even Julie B., super wealthy and super hardcore gender warrior who was all-state last year and is going to Princeton, she can't stop us. We score every time. After practice, we go with Julie B. to Subliminal Burrito. It's a basically lame burrito haven because this is the Midwest and not many people know how to make burritos the way they do, for instance, in California. Still, we are hungry and we smash. I cover my burrito with so much guacamole, it looks like a mountain of green mud avalanched all over it. Julie B., with great pride, tells us how Tamara broke up with Edwin. We all agree this is progress. Edwin's a graduate of the same school of how to be a horrible boyfriend as Jake. So score 1 for humanity. Julie B., with less pride, tells us how her whole AP stats class cheats on every test, even the kid who has the golf scholarship to Notre Dame. Isn't golf the sport where you're supposed to be honorable, Mallory asks. No one's honorable, Julie B. says. No one anywhere. So I also just want to thank my friend Patrick Flores-Scott over here, who's an incredible writer. His most recent book's called American Road Trip. You need to check that out. He blurbed this book for me and just helped me a lot with writing in general. So that's my boy Patrick. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Fifth Avenue Press. Y'all the best.
Okay, so our next speaker and author is an example of somebody who is pretty amazing in terms of the things we all might do on the side. Rick Solomon is also known as Dr. Rick for being a local and internationally known expert on autism in children and the founder of the Play Project. And then on the side, he thinks and talks and, ruminates over Salvador Dali and the Dalai Lama and how those two things might intersect. One shout out to one of the things that makes this press as awesome as it is because we have great graphic designers, and this book of poetry really gave one of our designers, Nate, an awesome challenge because, of course, we could not reproduce Salvador Dali paintings, but we could use them as inspiration. So please give a warm welcome to Rick Solomon.
Thanks so much, Erin. Hasn't she done an amazing job? Seriously. So as she mentioned, this is called Dali. The inspiration for it came from Salvador Dali's paintings, and so there's 9 sections in the book, each that make the divisions, and then the Dalai Lama, represents the Buddhist philosophy. And so the Book of Poems is really about going from dream reality to spiritual reality, and kind of everything in between. Starting with love poems. So this first poem is for my wife, sitting over there. We've been married 50 years yesterday. And every year I would write her, a poem for our anniversary. So this one is called The River Through Your Eyes. It's for Linda. 30 years ago today, we stood eye to eye before Rabbi Beerglass, me unshaven and out of work, you rebellious, doing what your mother wanted. Short-sighted, each in our own way, 30 Mays later, we are picturing chickadees, juncos, and jays on our birdsong CD and outside our bedroom window. Why wouldn't I see the river valley through your eyes? What with the thrill of Trillium, the wild geese chasing trains to Chicago, the eagle who stared you down from our backyard, the beady-eyed wood ducks awkward on the bow. Even now, the Japanese sunrise reflecting in the river like 2 eyes is so beautiful. How could you believe it? The body has changed around the soul that loves you, and the soul has gotten older too. But you can see right through me, and I can read you like a book full of surprises. Remember where you put it? In there, by the other thing. Little inside joke. One look, and I knew you were for me. Yes, the giant double-trunk cherry tree crushed our roof. We buried our cat of 17 years. Our best friend died of breast cancer. I lost my father to lymphoma all this year. Look out there. Last year's cattails at the edge of Birch Island have new shoots. The water lilies are just breaking the surface like river eyes about to open everywhere. You see that? 2 old swans landing downstream. So I am a pediatrician, and my mentor was a guy named Ray Helfer, who actually wrote the book, The Battered Child, which was the first book of its kind to actually medicalize child abuse. And so I studied with Ray, and this is the story of, as the first line says, my first case from the ER. It's called Crossing Borders for Ray Helfer. 10 years ago, I came to you with my first case from the ER. A little boy left alone overnight in his crib screamed until someone called the police. You said it shouldn't hurt to be a child, but the smell of alcohol and cigarettes on his father's breath, the emptiness in his mother's crack-ridden eyes, the never-ending blame, hands that hurt, the taste of blood, every sense left his body and lived in exile across borders. Teach him to speak sensory, you said. But I was speechless in a foreign country where there was too much to feel. Then, in your quiet way, you taught me even children with bloody lips and broken bones love their parents, that abusers will always hurt their children, recalling the strap against their back when they were young. But pain didn't have to be inherited, and I didn't have to run away from mine. Last year, I invited you to lecture about mothers in captivity and families without fathers. At our last meal together, we laughed instead about our fathers holding on to our bicycle seats, sweating all the way down the street while we pedaled until we found our balance. Since then, I've hidden the baby in a blanket so his mother wouldn't bond before adopting him out. I've seen a teenager still bleeding from birth, handcuffed and taken away from her newborn in the name of justice. I've rocked infants jittery from cocaine withdrawal every week I've been in the newborn nursery. And I've examined a 3-year-old girl with no hymen. Yesterday, when I listened with my stethoscope to a little boy in the office, hand to his heart, hand on his back, and heard in that distance these sounds of exile, I kept my balance, crossed the border from outrage to compassion, to that country between us, again, thanks to you. On a happier note, I'm going to read a poem called Ode to Zingerman's Pulled Pork Sandwich, which you can find in Zingerman's menu. There's a story behind that, but we don't have time to tell it. Ode to Zingerman's Pulled Pork Sandwich. Ah, the joys of pork, circumcision notwithstanding. Our inheritance of dread from Adam notwithstanding. I sit alone in postprandial bliss in Zingerman's Roadhouse. Whoever is not guilty, complicit in their comfort of daily immoral acts in these end times, cast the first stone. Even Nestle's, the very best chocolate beans, are harvested by child slaves in Ivory Coast. But postmodern in its social responsibility toward fine eating, except killing, $12 mac and cheese Zingerman's Roadhouse with their philosophy of excellence at any cost has won me over at some expense. Oi, they roast the whole pig slowly on a spit, on site, in a big roaster. Then do they soak it? No one knows. In special juices of papaya, peppers, cardamom, and cloves, such as to make the unembodied angels weep from jealousy? The west wind's aroma wafts among the strip malls, up and down Stadium, past the yoga center, and the Castle Beer, Wine, and Cigar Store, and Nicola's Bookstore. Pulled muscle, I say, stripped from the bone of some smart oinker raised to die for our double chins. And in full awareness of my sins, I confess, with 2 Kunt ales having passed through the splanchniks, now soaking my frontal brain with froth, this is the best Foinken pulled pork sandwich in the best big-ass pork-soaked sesame seed Kaiser roll with the best ministered with mayo, anointed in apple cider vinegar, and shrived in yellow mustard coleslaw, exactly matched to the savory tang of pulled pork, such that if the Buddha ate meat, he'd eat Zingerman's pulled pork sandwich. How much of our day is spent in longing, expecting, anticipating, measuring, waiting for our desire to match our expectations. Better even than the first drag on a camel after months of failed abstinence, this sandwich fits sire and sow more than just a met desire. This alchemy was like some Gnostic recipe for seeing God, and I dwelled in thy house as I savored and sucked swine with my eyes closed, meditating, and chewed it to an essence and pouched it in my cheek like the strike of a slow curveball in the catcher's mitt that ends the World Series, played over and over and over again in slow motion and recorded at home on DVD for posterity forever and ever.
Okay, so moving on to our next picture book, Kristen and Brad Northrup with their second book with Fifth Avenue Press. Their first one was Akina the Crocodile, and which is also for sale. And they both have totally different looks. The artwork is amazing. Brad and Kristen are one of our dynamic duos where they write and illustrate, and it all comes together for us. Maribel the Bat is a really unique book, especially if you're wanting to expose young kids to all different kinds of art and art styles. They're both teachers, which I think will be very clear because they They know their audience very well. So please give a warm welcome to Brad and Kristen Northrup.
Thanks, Aaron. Yes, as Aaron mentioned, this is our second book, first one being Akina the Crocodile. I'm going to get a hunchback if I don't fix this. There we go. That took us 10 years to get that book completed. This last one we were able to do in about a year and a half, so we kind of have the process refined a little bit. Also have to thank Amanda, the graphic designer. She was amazing. She helped format this book and did a lot of work, so she gets a lot of thanks. Kristen will read the book, and then at the end I'll talk a little bit about the art. You'll not find anything inspired by Salvador Dali in this, but you certainly could have, and I'll explain a little bit of that after we're done with the book.
Yes, thank you everyone for coming here. Whichever author you're here to support, we really appreciate your presence today. Are you clicking for me, or? Right. All right, thank you. All right, as Brad said, this is our second book. The first one, it took us 10 years, in part because we just had no idea how to publish it. So as previous authors have shared, get your work out on paper and then submit it. And we are so fortunate to have the Ann Arbor District Library here in our community, and we really appreciate it. So the second book didn't take quite as long, in part because we knew what we were doing this time. So I will read. Maribel the Bat lives in the old church steeple. Every evening at dusk, Maribel awakens from her slumber. As the bright moon begins to rise, Maribel opens her wings and leaps into the dark sky. Using her ears to guide her, Maribel ventures into the night air, ready to explore her world. Maribel flies between the creaking willow trees. In her mind, she imagines what they look like. Maribel flies over the curious, chatty raccoons. In her mind, she imagines what they look like. Maribel flies above the rambling brook where the fish splash and swim. In her mind, she imagines what they look like. Maribel flies through the low clouds with the soft splashing raindrops. In her mind, she imagines what they look like. Maribel flies under the nest of watchful hooting owls. In her mind, she imagines what they look like. Maribel flies behind the field of wildflowers rustling in the wind. In her mind, she imagines what they look like. Maribel flies beside the croaking, leaping frogs. In her mind, she imagines what they look like. Maribel flies toward the rolling hill with the climbing bighorn sheep. In her mind, she imagines what they look like. Maribel flies beneath the stone bridge where the quiet fireflies dance. In her mind, she imagines what they look like. As the bright moon begins to fade, Maribel knows it is time to return home. Maribel's world is a wonderful place, or so she imagines. And thank you. They don't have this, I don't think. For both of our books, also because we're teachers, so we have to do this, we have facts about bats and also facts about crocodiles, but we try to make it a little humorous. So we talk about how Akina the crocodile, certain things she does in the book, real crocodiles do not do, and for the bat as well. And one picture that I don't know, I don't think it's part of the display, but Brad's going to talk a bit about the art, and at the end of the book, this is another creative genius idea by Amanda. Brad was inspired by different artists, as you probably recognized a few different art styles there, but we do talk about the art styles as well at the end of the book. So Brad, go ahead.
Okay. So yeah, originally I came up with the idea that Maribel was going to fly to various destinations and then use her imagination. I was just going to then do my own style of art to come up with what her imagination was doing. Then in the middle of the night, I woke up and went, why don't I actually pick established styles of arts or artists, do my art in that style, and then it's kind of an educational book as well as telling a story. So why did I pick the artists I picked? I don't know, those were the ones I guess that I liked at the time. Most people recognize the Starry Night influence with the fireflies, Vincent van Gogh. There's Aboriginal style art with the fish. All those, of course, are listed at the end of the book. Great idea that Amanda had. Another big famous one was Peter Max, that inspired the raccoon picture. Peter Max, of course, from the famous Yellow Submarine Beatles era. So he was another artist that inspired me. Could have done Salvador Dali, but he wasn't in my wheelhouse at that time. Could have picked a million other artists, but those were the ones that kind of caught my attention then. Hilda Oft Klimp, I have to talk about her. She inspired the flower pictures where Maribel flies over the flowers. Heard about her from a friend who had seen a display of hers at the Guggenheim. She was a, I believe, Austrian expressionist painter who did not show any of her art while she lived. She didn't want any of her work to be shown until she passed away. Then when she passed away, boom, her work exploded. It's been displayed throughout the world. And her story really intrigued me as well as her beautiful art. And I thought, wow, she purposely didn't want anyone to see it until she moved on. So she was an interesting story. So that's why I picked her. The others were just ones that interested me at the time. You want to talk about process or no? Yeah. So anyways, we came up with, we had to pick up different words about where the bat was going to go. And this is where Kristen really had to work on it because I'm not the writer. I'm the art guy, picture guy. She was the word person.
Yeah, so Brad usually says, I have this story idea and I have these great pictures and you need to write it. That's really how it works. But yeah, so some people also ask us how we can collaborate and still stay married. And in part it's because I let him be in charge of all the pictures and then I take over the words. But we do have to collaborate because, for example, when he was painting or drawing the bridge picture, he's like, do you have the bat flying above the bridge or beneath? And so, we have to coordinate a bit, but for the most part, he sticks to the art because you do not want me drawing a book, and I stick to the words, and it seems to work quite well. So thank you again. We appreciate you coming out on this beautiful Sunday afternoon, and thank you, Aaron and Amanda, and everyone else at Fifth Avenue Press. It's been a joy to work with you.
And just to note, Brad has since retired, so who knows what they may do now when he did all that. Okay, so another author who is publishing their second book with us and also has a whole other life working at the university is Charles Taylor. His second book, Watching, is a mystery about Detroit detectives and former lovers George Eaton and Carla Bassett, who have always stuck with low-risk cases until a new client asks them to investigate a murder, and suddenly everyone from a local crime boss to the police poses a deadly threat. We also did Charles's first book, Dark Rhythm. Both have amazing covers, also done by one of our designers, Nate. So please give a warm welcome to Charles Taylor.
Afternoon, everybody. Okay, so as Aaron mentioned, Watching is my second novel for Fifth Avenue Press. I'd like to thank the press and the library, also Erin and her team. I'd like to thank as well Nate Podai Morrison, who did the covers for both books, Amy Somerton, who is my indispensable editor, my family and friends, always supportive, and in particular, my wife, Debbie, who is my partner in all things. All right. So this is an excerpt from one chapter of Watching. George rang the doorbell of a comfy Celine home. Earl Gaines, nearing retirement now, but never more capable looking, answered the door and smiled. Well, here he is, the man himself. Hey, Uncle Earl. Earl embraced him with real warmth. Come on in here. A woman's touch sang from every drape, end table, and cabinet in the living room and dining room. But a cared-for throwback stereo system in the basement rec room announced the territory Earl had staked out for himself. Wood-encased tower speakers dating from the 70s, each over 4 foot tall. hugged two of the of the room's corners. Shelves full of vinyl albums and CDs lined the walls, flanked by portraits of jazz icons. Though he had never picked up an instrument in his life, this temple to the music would have rivaled any erected by a musician. Earl put on a CD, Tony Malaby's Tamarindo, and nodded George to an easy chair. They listened to a few bars of the threesome's free jazz roll, Floating Head, before Earl threw him an impish glance. Too scary for you? I know you tend to get seasick over time you can't count. Countable time's not an issue, but I do need to be able to feel it. You can't feel that pulse? Here I got 20-some years on you, but you are so old school. Beer? I'm good. What you been up to? Earl got a bottle from a small fridge in the corner and sat. Same old, making a living, injuring nobody. They catch you at it, you'll be fighting off cage hounds before long. You let me worry about all that. How about you? Ever think about playing music again? Sorry about that little slip here. Let me see. I'm good enough to know my limitations. Besides, the sleuthing gig is growing up pretty nice lately. And you're the one should be worried about those cage hounds, a sneaky-looking brother nosing around other folks' business all day long. How's Carla? Good, good. Justine around? At work. Why? What's up? What do you know about Jenny Riddle? Big money, sharp in business, deep into charity work, but keeps pretty quiet about it all. I can also use whatever you can tell me about a former colleague of yours. Colleague, huh? Earl laughed. Who we talking about? You keep up with Donald Penn anymore? What flashed across his uncle's eyes before he answered fed George the first real doubt he'd had since Lieutenant Burnshaw's office. Hell, keep the hell out of his way is more like it. No dealings with him at all? No safe way to deal with him these days. How's that? The cat's got no discernible sense of humor since he came up in the world. Fact is, he's a 10 times bigger crook as a businessman than he ever was as a legitimate criminal. For one thing, he's a grabby son of a bitch. Reason he hasn't got a record is in the old days he never reached too big. Ron stuck to the petty sands and stayed shadowy, no complications. But he's scheming heavy nowadays. Oh yeah, believes himself ascendant, and the man likes his intimidations. Blackmail if he's got the material, but no qualms whatsoever about strong arm. You can bet there are bodies below ground. That bad. Just check out the company he keeps. 2 big-ass chest thumpers full-time with more rented as needed. His big trick, though, is keeping the general public ignorant about the part of him that's a straight-up desperado. He's got that corporate exterior and that smooth delivery. He's even talked about running for office someday. But under the skin, entirely different animal. Me, I'm all about keeping my distance. What do you think I'm doing way out here in Saline? But you still pick up stuff, right? I can't see you not talking to people. I listen to people. I'm a scholar of social interaction. It was George's turn to laugh, naturally. So you know any reason why you might be interested in the student housing business? You talking about that thing with that smiling Negro, Devereaux? George was pleased to see real admiration in his uncle's eyes. Earl Gaines was not easy to impress. How'd you hear about that? Ain't exactly advertised. That's why I came to the horse's mouth. What's up between those two? Details I don't have, but I know it's not about business. Aren't they partners? One way to look at it. Earl watched him and drew from his beer bottle. George knew that he was weighing the wisdom of sharing certain information and said nothing. A Detroit resident most of his life, Earl knew the city from skyscraper to sewer. He respected the outlaws and held cautious contempt for the politicians, black and white, urban and suburban. He would share with his sister's son only what he believed George would understand well enough to avoid endangering himself with it. His uncle would open up or he wouldn't. There would be no debate involved. Word is, he said, making his decision, that transaction was all about stroking the lion. Devereaux pissed Penn off, then he had to pay him off. Pissed him off how? How you piss off any thief? You steal from him. Thanks again for coming out. Hope you all have a great afternoon.
Charles and his wife Debbie Taylor are another one of our amazing dynamic duos. Debbie has published one picture book with us over in Motown, and we have another one coming out at our next event in December. So, another book that I think is an example of an extremely unusual submission that we just took to immediately. This is a student project that turned into something more. I'm going to let Aaron talk about it because it's got, there's a lot of humor to it too, but it involves solo cups, which seem to be the representation for college life in many ways, and social experimentation intersecting. So please give a warm welcome to Erin Wakeland with her book, What Are You Looking At?
Thank you, Erin. Hi, everyone. My name's Erin, too. My book is What Are You Looking At? It started as my senior thesis. It was 4 social experiments that I documented and cataloged within personal essays. They're all experiments that reflect on relationships between worthiness, ordinariness, and what happens to our attention in capitalist systems and everyday life. So the first experiment is took place in my neighborhood in Southview. I collected littered solo cups and mended them and returned them to their owners. The second experiment, I created a handmade banner that says, "You have everything you need," and I hung it in different locations around town, photographed it, and documented all of the reactions and conversations I had about it. The third one was a series of postcards placed around town that said, "What have you noticed lately?" as a prompt, and that are pre-stamped to my P.O. box, and people would fill them out and return them. And then the fourth experiment was at Meyer. I was an artist in residence at Meyer on Jackson Road, and I set up shop, and I was like en plein air painting in the way that like French Impressionists traditionally set up their canvases and painted natural landscapes. I did that in the Superstore. And so I'll read an excerpt from the first chapter, which is Returning Red Solo. It's the Red Solo Cup experiment. I woke up today in the same house I've been waking up in for 2 years. The creak of the stairs is my morning hymn as I totter down to brew coffee. My house is old. It was built in 1906 and has poor insulation to prove it. Surrounding it are typical college homes, apartments, and fraternities crammed together like Lego pieces. I wonder what the street looked like in 1906. A dirt road patterned with the shadows of trees, a few idle horses, and a good view of the cemetery 2 blocks away. Certainly, shoes were not hanging from telephone wires, nor were makeshift beer pong tables splayed out like smashed bugs in yards, trash blowing down gutters like tumbleweed. It is October in the South University neighborhood of Ann Arbor, Michigan. To get home, I walk past the Theta Chi fraternity house. I am well informed of this fraternity's doings through locational osmosis. I'm often awoken on Saturday morning by their blaring of Mr. Brightside by the Killers. The artifacts left on the sidewalks and yards are not uncommon across the neighborhood, but Theta Chi is the biggest culprit of littering on my street. I've collected some beautifully smashed cans that now hang in my studio. The red Solo Cup, a frat party emblem, remains aplenty across their yard and spills into the gutter. These little red sirens tease me on my walk home, luring me with their song of a micro-free plastic water source if I pick them up. They peek through matted leaves and dirty snow caps like rubies, the broken ones still traceable to their original form. I walk by these cups and think about a reality in which they are as precious as rubies. We would keep our cup at the party and wash it out when we were finished. We would stack it with the glass cups or position it like a trophy in the display of chinaware. When it breaks, we would repair it. When it is beyond repair, we would still treasure it. I experiment with how long I can take my packed lunch in the plastic bag that once held sandwich bread before it tears. I ran out of maple syrup and used the bottle to hold salad dressing. I make a sweater out of a thrifted blanket and patch my jeans when they tear. In my own life, I try to smooth out the hierarchy of preciousness that I assign to the objects surrounding me. By doing so, I hope to pay close attention to what I consume and become imaginative with how I use things. The life of the red Solo cup post-drink is currently unaccounted for. What if we treat the cup with the same integrity as an object with emotional and monetary worth? I started to collect the strewn cups outside the Theta Chi fraternity house on the corner of Washtenaw and Southview. In the evening, I tediously mended them like it was 1906 and I was waiting for the fire to burn out while Pa played the fiddle. I needle punched holes parallel to the cracks of the cups and laced the red thread through. Sometimes the holes would split, leaving me with more work to do. Once, absolutely frustrated with the pace of the activity, I tried to hot glue a crack. It bubbled and cinched holes through the red thin plastic. Too hot. I began to question everything. Treat it preciously, I repeated in my head, holding myself to my intention. I picked up the needle again. Despite my care in mending them, you can spot my cups in a lineup. They are clumsy and odd and certainly not suave. Nevertheless, last Saturday afternoon during the Theta Chi party for the Penn State versus U of M game, I ventured over to their backyard tailgate to return their possessions. Videographer Miriam Siegel followed me to document the interactions. And that's where I'll stop. Thank you.
Erin's book includes a lot of images as well, and the interactions are some of the best parts, so definitely take a look at that book. All right, so our last author speaking is actually going to be James Barbatano. This is our, here we go. Grandpa Kai in His Garden is also a book coming out, but that was written by graduate students that are so busy they couldn't get us the book, so if you have a library card, you can download it and read it. And maybe someday we'll be able to tell you where you can buy it. But James Barbatano is also a local young author who his second book with us, Moonberry Pie. His first book was The Dragon Library. And a good example of some of the things that happen with some of our artists and illustrators meeting each other. The illustrator for both of James's books, Douglas Bosley, also published a book with us about modern crab and his adventures on a planet. So that is for sale as well. Let's give a warm welcome to James Barbatano as he talks about Moonberry Pie.
Hello, everyone. First off, I'd like to say that there are a lot of great storytellers in this building, and I congratulate you on that. Second, I was not anticipating that this book would turn out as good as I thought it would be. This book went through a lot of revisions and rewrites. At some point, I actually thought, what would happen if I wrote this as a comic book? But then I thought, what the heck, I'll write it as an early chapter book. But the main reason why this story came to be was one day I was minding my own business, and that's when the title Moonberry Pie popped into my head, which was quite the surprise. I thought, Moonberry Pie, where did that come from? But then as I worked around the story a little bit, I was using a little bit of a technique that I was trying to develop, which is what I was also studying for a bit, called The Hero's Journey by Joseph Campbell. I wanted to create my own simplified version of it, so the original was 12 or 13 steps, where I wanted to narrow it down to 4. And those 4 steps helped a little bit with Miss Wiccan's journey to come up with the perfect pie for one of her customers. If anyone's if anyone's open, I'd be happy to read like 2 or 3 chapters from my book, if anyone's open. First off, I would like to dedicate this book to my grandparents and also to one of my good friends here, Tabby, who's right there in the audience. Chapter 1. Once upon a time, in the town of Nilbog, Michigan, there was a little bakery called Miss Wiccan's Pie Shop. It was shaped like a witch's hat and smelled like French vanilla and powdered sugar. Miss Wiccan had flaming orange hair and always dressed in brightly colored clothing. Although she was more than 100 years old, Miss Wiccan looked as if she was in her late 20s and was as beautiful as a daffodil. Miss Wiccan had a pet cat named Gozeki, and together they baked pies for all the children of Nilbog. They baked apple cinnamon pies, blueberry pies, and even birthday cake pies. But Miss Wiccan's most famous creation was the moonberry pie. It had candy-like flavor that children and parents both loved. "How do you do it?" the children would ask all the time. "How do you make such delicious pies?" "I can't tell you that," Miss Wiccan said. "It's a secret." Chapter 2. One afternoon, Miss Wiccan and her cat were cleaning the bakery, which was covered in pie crumbs from the children eating their favorite treats. "What a mess," Miss Wiccan said. "Children should learn to clean up after themselves. There are muddy footprints all over the place, too." "I like the dirt," Gozeki said. "It's fun to roll around in, and it keeps my fur nice and stinky." "Most cats like to be clean," Miss Wiccan said. "Why can't you be more like them?" "Because I'm not most cats," Gozeki replied. "I'm your animal familiar, your furry magical sidekick, and we familiars can't act like regular animals. We're more like people than critters." "Obviously," Miss Wiccan murmured. "Now who do you think that could be?" Miss Wiccan sighed. "Hey," Gozeki said, "we're closed." But Miss Wiccan opened the front door, and there stood a little girl in a green hooded jacket. It was Tanya Schwartz. She was one of Miss Wiccan's favorite customers. "Hello, little Miss Tanya," Miss Wiccan said. "What brings you to this cozy corner of the world?" "Hello, Miss Wiccan," Tanya said. "May I buy a slice of moonberry pie? My grandmother's birthday is tomorrow, and I want to give her something special." "Please come in," Miss Wiccan said. "Wait right here, and I'll cut you a slice." Miss Wiccan went into the kitchen. It was as messy as a paintball field. She looked inside the refrigerator, but there was no moonberry pies to be seen. In fact, there were no moonberry pies in the whole bakery. "This isn't good," Miss Wiccan said. When she told Tanya the news, the youngest didn't take it very well. All Miss Wiccan could do was give the crying girl a hug and a pat on her head. "I am truly sorry," said Miss Wiccan. "It's not fair," said Tanya. "I promise I'll make it up to you, Tanya," said Miss Wiccan. So yeah, that was what I meant when I was saying, like, when I was coming up with 4 basic steps for my story. Like, you have a main character, you have a want, desire, or objective that they wish to accomplish. Next, they go through a series of trials, or road of trials as I like to call it. And then you have the resolved situation, which is how the story will end, like whether the main character changes for better or worse. It's something I wanted to try out, and I think I did a pretty good job at it. So, like I said, once again, there are a lot of great storytellers in here, and I congratulate you all, and can't wait to look forward to seeing you all again in December. Thank you.
Okay, so before we unleash you to buy books and get them signed, Grandpa Kai and his garden is, again, like I said, 3 graduate students who have many other pursuits in life just decided to write a picture book on the side. And it's actually inspired by Alex's grandfather, who creates little urban oases of gardens in the middle of the city where he lives. So it's a beautiful book. Right now, you can do a direct download, and like I said, maybe we'll find out where you can buy it soon. But before I send you all to meet the authors, we were very lucky, and during the pandemic, we hired a new librarian named John Bunkley, who joined Fifth Avenue Press and got so inspired that he decided we needed to have something else called Fifth Avenue Studios. So I'm going to let him give a brief talk about that, and then come and talk to us and come and talk to the authors.
Thanks. Thanks, Aaron. So what is Fifth Avenue Studios? Fifth Avenue Studios, you can think of it a lot like Fifth Avenue Press, but we are here to foster the creation of original audio content. So we launched Fifth Avenue Studios. So we support local podcasters, musicians, album creators. So if you want to launch a podcast or an album or produce an audio drama, we might be here to help you out. So you can always write us at Fifth Avenue Studios at AADL.org. I'm going to be wandering around after this, and just introduce yourself if you know an audio creator, if you're a musician. We don't care what type of musician. You can be a rapper, you can be a country musician, you can be an electronic musician, you can be a classical musician, you can be a chamber jazz musician. Bring it, and we would love to hear it, and we would love to help you out. Thank you so much.
So thank you to everybody for coming today. We do have our next event planned for Sunday, December 4th. We'll be releasing a whole new batch of books. So please give a warm, warm, warm congratulations to all of our authors and their family and friends today. And thank you for coming.